Hello, my name is Marian Guevara and thank you for stopping by and clicking on this video. So if you are new to this channel, welcome. And if you would like to hear me talk about books, films, then yeah, feel free to stick around and check out if my content is to your liking, and then give a like and subscribe. So anyway, as you can tell from the title, I will be doing a book haul. This will be covering all the books I gathered from November to December. So this has a lot of like Christmas gifts, like books I bought with Christmas money. So without further ado, let's just get started. And the first one of these books is The House of Mirth by Edith Warren in the beautiful Penguin English Library Edition. Now, I talked about this book more in depth in my previous video called My Favorite Books of 2020. But this takes place in the Gilded Age of America, and we're following an impoverished socialite named Lily Bart. And she's trying to obtain a foothold into the elite of New York society. And it's basically her towing the line, trying to obtain the privileges of this elite society, but also trying to keep her freedom. So I already read this, and as you can tell, since it was part of my favorite books of 2020, I loved it. So yeah. That's House of Mirth. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Great God Pan and Other Horror Stories by Arthur Machen. This is part of the Oxford World Classics edition. Now, I read this in the beginning of 2020 and really loved it. This is, as you can tell, a bunch of horror stories by Arthur Machen. And if you are a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, I would definitely recommend that you read some Machen, because he was one of the authors that heavily inspired Lovecraft. And I would recommend this edition because it is very much a comprehensive one. If you're a fan of weird fiction, of horror classics in general, I'd recommend The Great God Pan and Other Horror Stories. The next 4 books are all part of the SF Masterworks line. You may know that I'm really getting into sci-fi, and I do want to collect my sci-fi classics in these editions. So the first one I have here is Mockingbird by Walter Tevis. And I originally owned the blue cover with the black spine. However, I did want the newer edition. And similar to The House of Mirth, this was featured in my favorite books of 2020 list. So yeah, I really adored this novel. And this one was pretty hard to get a hold of, because normally I would buy it off a book depository, but it was unavailable for a long time. I think it's still unavailable. So I had to order this off of Waterstones. I highly recommend that people read this. I don't see any people at all like talking about this or anything. Walter Tevis is the same guy who wrote The Queen's Gambit, which got adapted into that famous Netflix series. So check out his sci-fi. So yeah, that's Mockingbird. Another Walter Tevis novel, that is The Man Who Fell to Earth. Once again, I did own this. I had to sell it off, but I repurchased this copy. And yeah, this is absolutely stunning. You can tell that they made the face look very much like David Bowie, who starred in the adaptation of this novel. So yeah, The Man Who Fell to Earth, if you're not familiar with this, is about an alien who comes from this planet that is suffering from the effects of a, I believe, nuclear war, which left his planet without many resources. So he's traveled to Earth to obtain a way to help his people. However, some individuals have begun to suspect about his alien origins. So yeah, that's The Man Who Fell to Earth, and I am looking forward to watching the film adaptation and then maybe doing a video on the book and the movie side by side. So yeah. So next is the first book I read out of the SF Masterworks line, and that is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. And this one I highly recommend. I read this like I think 3 or 4 years ago, and I was just blown away, especially by that ending. I know this got turned into the Will Smith film, but please read the book. The book is, in my opinion, better, and it's quite short. I was actually unaware how much sci-fi there was in it, so I was pleasantly surprised. If you're unfamiliar with the story, we're following a man named Robert Neville who, for pretty much all intents and purposes, is the last man on Earth. Everyone else has pretty much turned into vampires. I would highly recommend this book to people who maybe are not into science fiction. This is a really great sci-fi horror. And yeah, I had to own a copy. This one I didn't buy off of like Book Depository or Waterstones. I actually got this at the bargain section at my local Books A Million, and that is The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. I already own the Penguin English Library edition, but it was really cheap and I couldn't pass up because this is a gorgeous cover. So if you're unfamiliar with The Island of Dr. Moreau, it's like one of four of H.G. Wells' major sci-fi works. And we're following a shipwrecked sailor who ends up on this island that is run by a Dr. Moreau who was chased out of London due to some very unsavory experiments involving animals. So yeah, that's The Island of Dr. Moreau. Now these next two books are ones that I have read before, and now I own physical copies and I plan on rereading them. So the first is The House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer, and this is one that I read way back in elementary school, and I remember really loving it when I read it. So when I saw this copy, and this is the cover that I read as a child, when I saw it, I was like, I need to reread it again and see how I like it. So this one follows a young boy named Matteo Alacron, who was born unconventionally. He's basically a clone. He is a clone of this very infamous drug lord who controls a portion of land called Opium that is between the United States and then what was once Mexico. And Matteo is kind of just brought into this sinister world, this world of corruption and of family intrigue, and just trying to find his place within the world, basically. So yeah. And the next one is Perfume, The Story of a Murderer by Patrick Suskind, or Suskind, I'm not entirely sure. This is part of the Penguin Modern Classics editions, the one with the teal spines, which I'm actually growing on. So if you're unfamiliar with the story of Perfume, we're following, this takes place in 18th century France, 18th century Paris, I believe. And we're following a man, Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, who is born with this almost inhuman-like sense of smell, and how he becomes sort of infatuated with capturing the perfect scent, and he ends up learning the skills of a perfumer. And in order to capture the perfect scent that he's come across, he ends up killing various women to make the perfume. I read this, I think, in my first year of college, and I gave it 4 stars then, but I would really like to revisit it now because, I don't know, just it seems like a book that I would really love. As morbid as that sounds, like I know how it ends and everything, but I just would like to revisit it and see how I view the story now. So I did manage to snag 2 NYRB classics. These are my first owned copies. So the first one I have here is Shadows of Carcosa, Tales of Cosmic Horror by Lovecraft, Chambers, Mack & Poe, and other masters of the weird. So first of all, I just adore this cover. Creepy, cool artwork, really fits the tone of the book, of the collection. And yeah, as you can tell, these are just weird fiction stories. I really loved this collection, and I would recommend it to those who are just trying to dip their toe into weird fiction or cosmic horror. I wouldn't recommend this to more seasoned readers, but if you want to get into weird fiction, if you just want to introduce yourself to the classics of that subgenre, then I would recommend this collection. So the next NYRB classic is The Other by Thomas Tryon, and this is considered a landmark of psychological horror and was a huge hit when it came out in, I think, 1971. I think that's the year it came out. So this follows 2 twins during 1934. They are Niles and Perry Holland, and after the unexpected death of their father, their mother gets very seclusive and they are pretty much left to their own devices. And these twins are very different from one another. Niles is very polite, he's eager to please, you know, generally a good boy, while Holland is very bold and mischievous. And as the summer goes on, Holland starts committing some very heinous pranks, and basically Niles has to come to terms with the fact that he can't be making up excuses for his brother anymore. So yeah, this one was actually really, really good, and I would recommend this if you're into psychological horrors. It is considered a modern classic of the genre, so yeah. The next book is another SF Masterworks, and that is Time Out of Joint by Philip K. Dick. I've already read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and A Scanner Darkly, so I decided I want to read another Philip K. Dick. His writing style is very interesting, so I want to delve more into it. And this one is very fascinating. So we're following a man named Regal Gum, who is pretty ordinary, and he basically he makes his living entering into, I think, a newspaper contest that he happens to win every single day. And pretty soon he begins to suspect that the world around him is just an illusion that is created in order to keep him placated and happy. So yeah, it sounds a lot like The Matrix, at least from the summary. So looking forward to delving into this one. The next one is another Oxford World classic, and that is The Lives of the Caesars by Suetonius. In other editions, this is known as the 12 Caesars because this is basically 12 mini biographies of 12 Roman emperors, starting from Julius Caesar all the way to Domitian. So this contains a lot of famous stories. Of course, we have the Ides of March, the assassination of Julius Caesar, but then we also have Caligula and Nero. I wanted to learn a bit more about Roman history, and yeah, it's not like a subject that I've really delved into, and I thought this would be a good, type of, dip into the subject matter. Then we have The Thing on the Doorstep and Other Weird Stories by H.P. Lovecraft. So this is the third compilation of Lovecraft's works, and I wanted to get the Penguin Classics edition because these ones always have an introduction by S.T. Joshi, who happens to be the one living man who's like the H.P. Lovecraft expert. So this is just another collection of Lovecraft's stories. I've been really wanting to get into more Lovecraft. I only have read The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories, but I loved it a lot, so I wanted to read more from him. So I have this one, and then I also have here The Dreams in the Witch House, which is my current read. So I just thought I'd pick this one up as well. So yeah. Then we also have another short story collection, and that is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. So this contains 7 speculative fiction short stories, but the most notable one here is the title one, which actually won a Hugo back in the day. So I'll only give a synopsis for this one, but basically it takes place in a post-apocalyptic future in which humanity has been destroyed or eliminated by this AI, this machine that humanity actually created in order to fight its wars. It grew sentient, began to despise humanity, and once it destroyed everything on Earth, it kidnapped 5 individuals so that it could sadistically torture them for the rest of their prolonged lives, basically. So yeah, I've read this one already, so I've already read 3 books out of the ones that I hauled, so it can't be said that I don't read my haul books. Now, the last book that I'm going to mention is The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. Now, I have read Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day by him, and I loved them both. Now, The Buried Giant, I heard, is very controversial. Well, I don't want to say controversial. It's very polarizing. So, it's one of those books where you either love it or you don't. It's quite different from Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day, because it's more of a historical fiction rather than his 2 other books that I read. They're more modern, like 90s, stuff like that. But yeah, relatively so. This one takes place during post-Arthurian Britain. So the wars that once raged between the Saxons and the Britons are over. And we're following 2 individuals, Axel and Beatrice, who are an elderly British couple who are on a search for their son who has been missing for a very long time. So yeah. Looking forward to this one, hoping that I end up loving it because, I absolutely loved Ishiguro's other 2 works that I've read from. They were both 5 stars, and I'm hoping The Buried Giant will join them. So those were all the books that I gathered from November and December, and it's going to be the last book haul for quite some time. So thanks again for clicking on this video and being interested in hearing what I managed to get these past 2 months. And if you enjoy the content I'm doing here, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And once again, thank you and see you next time.